All right, I'm back for chapters 21 and 22. So let's get started. I'm trying to upload the other one to YouTube while I do this so that I don't lose it again because that was so sad. So if something pops up, that's what it is, and I'll just get rid of it quickly. Okay, so chapter 21 starts, and it looks like we're in a new setting. It looks like we are at somewhere called Neil's Diner. The diner was called Neil's. The word was written in big, red neon letters that flashed on and off. Inside, it was warm and bright and smelled like fried chicken and toast and coffee. Bryce sat at the counter and put Edward on a stool next to him. He leaned the rabbit's head forward. He leaned the rabbit's forehead up against the counter so that he wouldn't fall. "What are you going to have, sugar?" the waitress said to Bryce. "Give me some pancakes," said Bryce, "and some eggs, and I want steak, too. I want a big old steak, and some toast, and some coffee." The waitress leaned forward and pulled at one of Edward's ears. Then she pushed him backwards so that she could see his face. "This your rabbit?" she said to Bryce. "Yes'm, he's mine now. He belonged to my sister." Bryce wiped at his nose with the back of his hand. "We're in show business, me and him." "Is that right?" said the waitress. She had a name tag on the front of her dress. Marlene, it said. She looked at Edward's face, and then she let go of his ear and fell forward, and he fell forward so that his head rested against the counter again. "Go ahead, Marlene," thought Edward. "Push me around. Do with me as you will. What does it matter? I'm broken. Broken." The food came, and Bryce ate all of it without even looking up from his plate. "Well, you was hungry for sure," said Marlene, as she cleared away his plates. "I reckon show business is hard work." "Yes'm," said Bryce. Marlene tucked the check under the coffee cup. Bryce picked it up and looked at it, and then shook his head. "I ain't got enough," he said to Edward. "Ma'am," he said to Marlene when she came back and filled up his coffee cup, "I ain't got enough." "What, sugar?" "I ain't got enough money." She stopped pouring the coffee and looked at him. "You're going to have to talk to Neil about—"
"I don't understand. I ain't got enough white sugar."
My watch was recording that. Okay. I ain't got enough. She stopped pouring the coffee and looked at him. "You're going to have to talk to Neil about that." Neil, it turned out, was both the owner and the cook. He was a large, red-haired, red-faced man who came out of the kitchen holding a spatula in one hand. "You came in here hungry, right?" he said to Bryce. "Yes, sir," said Bryce. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand. "And you ordered some food, and I cooked it, and Marlene brought it to you, right?" "I reckon," said Bryce. "You reckon?" said Neil, and he brought the spatula down on the countertop with a thwack. Bryce jumped. "Yes, sir. I mean, no, sir." "I cooked it for you," said Neil. "Yes, sir," said Bryce. He picked Edward up off the stool and held him close. Everyone in the diner had stopped eating. They were all staring at the boy and the rabbit and Neil. Only Marlene looked away. "You ordered it. I cooked it. Marlene served it. You ate it. Now," said Neil, "I want my money." And he tapped the spatula lightly on the counter. Bryce cleared his throat. You ever seen a rabbit dance?" he said. "How's that?" said Neil. "You ever before in your life seen a rabbit dance?" Bryce set Edward on the floor and started pulling the strings attached to his feet, making him do a slow shuffle. He put his harmonica in his mouth and played a sad song that went along with the dance. Somebody laughed. Bryce took the harmonica out of his mouth and said, "He could dance some more if you want him to. He could dance to pay for what I ate." Neil stared at Bryce, and then without warning, he reached down and grabbed hold of Edward. "This is what I think of dancing rabbits," said Neil, and he swung Edward by the feet, swung him so hard that his head hit the edge on the counter, hard. There was a loud crack. Bryce screamed, and Edward's world, went black. Ah! His face cracked. Here's chapter 22. I want to note that this is the picture on the cover of the book, too. So we'll check that out. It looks like he's walking by himself, which is an interesting piece because we know that Edward right now cannot walk on his own. It was dusk, and Edward was walking down the sidewalk. He was walking on his own, putting one foot in front of the other without any assistance from anybody. He was wearing a fine suit made of red silk. He walked down the sidewalk, and then he turned onto a path that led up to a house with lighted windows. I know this house, thought Edward. This is Abeline's house. I am on Egypt Street. Lucy came running out of the front door, barking and jumping and wagging her tail. Down, girl, said a deep, gruff voice. Edward looked up, and there was Bull standing at the door. Hello, Malone, said Bull. Hello, good old rabbit pie. We've been waiting for you. And Bull swung the door wide, and Edward walked inside. So I want you to think for a second. Do you think that right now this is real? Or is this a dream? Or is Edward kind of in this land where now that his head's been cracked? But to me, this doesn't seem like it could be real because Edward's walking on his own, and all these people that he loved are there right now. Abilene was there, and Nellie, and Lawrence, and Bryce. Susanna, called Nellie. Jangles, called Bryce. Edward, said Abilene. She held out her arms to him, but Edward stood still. He looked around the room. You searching for Sarah Ruth? Bryce asked. Edward nodded. You got to go outside if you want to see Sarah Ruth. So let's think for a second. What's the difference between Sarah Ruth and the rest of the people who Edward has loved? The difference is that Sarah Ruth has passed away. So to me, this seems like a dream, or like Edward maybe almost dying. We'll see. So they all went outside. Lucy and Bull and Nellie and Lawrence and Bryce and Abilene and Edward. Right there, said Bryce, and he pointed up at the stars. Yep, said Lawrence, that's the Sarah Ruth constellation. He picked Edward up and put him on his shoulder. You can see it right there. Edward felt a pang of sorrow, deep and sweet and familiar. Why did she have to be so far away? If only I had wings, he thought, I could fly to her. Out of the corner of his eye, the rabbit saw something flutter. Edward looked over his shoulder, and there they were, the most magnificent wings he had ever seen. Orange and red and blue and yellow, and they were on his back. They belonged to him. They were his wings. What a wonderful night this was. He was walking on his own. He had an elegant new suit, and now he had wings. He could fly anywhere, do anything. Why had he never realized it before? His heart soared inside of him. He spread his wings and flew off Lawrence's shoulders, out of his hands and right up into the nighttime sky, towards the stars, towards Sarah Ruth. No, shouted Abilene. Catch him, said Bryce. Edward flew higher. Lucy barked. Malone, shouted Bull, and with a terrific lunge, he grabbed hold of Edward's feet and pulled him out of the sky and wrestled him to the earth. You can't go yet, said Bull. Stay with us, said Abilene. Edward beat his wings, but it was no use. Bull held him firmly to the ground. Stay with us, repeated Abilene. Edward... Phew! Excuse me, hold on. Always good to wash your hands after you sneeze. Okay. Edward beat his wings, but it was no use. Bull held him firmly to the ground. Stay with us, repeated Abilene. Edward started to cry. I couldn't stand to lose you again, said Nellie. Neither could I, said Abilene. It would break my heart. Lucy bent her face to Edward, and she licked the tears away. So let's just talk about what happened there, because this chapter for me feels like sometimes people say that before you die, you like enter into this little like space where you can think about, some people just say like you can space between death and I don't know, whatever comes after death. So this place for me, I was thinking about how Edward,
I understand.
this is my life. Okay. Edward was flying up towards the sky, like almost maybe gonna die. And then Bull, right, grabbed him and brought him back. And everyone said, no, no, don't leave. So sounds like Edward did not die. And we'll have to find out what happens next. So on that note, I will be back with the next couple chapters, and I hope you have a great day.